June 1947, the smooth glass-like surface of the Straits of Malacca suddenly shattered. Multiple radio stations across the dark waters picked up a frantic pulsing distress signal. The Morse code was chaotic, broken, and dripping with an unearthly terror. Then came the voice transmission, a chilling message that froze the blood of everyone listening.
All officers, including captain, are dead, lying in chart room and bridge. Probably whole crew dead.
A terrifying burst of static followed. Then, the final two words, "I die." The signal was traced to a Dutch freighter floating aimlessly in the mist, the SS Ourang Medan. But as rescue ships raced toward the coordinates, a deeper mystery began to unfold. There was no official record of the Ourang Medan in any maritime registry. It was a ghost ship with no papers, no port of origin, and no country to claim it. Yet, it was out there, drifting, waiting. The American merchant ship, Silver Star, was the first to slice through the fog and find it. As the boarding party prepared to step onto the silent deck, the air grew unnaturally cold. They were stepping into a floating tomb, and the world was about to witness a scene of absolute horror. The first boots touched the wooden deck of the SS Ourang Medan, and the silence that greeted them was heavier than the sea fog. There was no sound of an engine, no creaking of ropes, only the rhythmic, hollow slapping of the waves against the hull. But it was the temperature that made the rescue crew freeze. It was a scorching summer day in the tropics, yet on the deck of this ship, the air was ice cold, their breath turned to white mist. As they advanced toward the superstructure, they stumbled upon the first body. It was a crewman lying flat on his back on the wooden planks. The boarding party braced themselves for a bloody scene of a pirate raid or a mutiny. But as they knelt beside him, they realized there was no blood, no wounds, no signs of struggle. Instead, the horror was etched entirely into the corpse's face. His teeth were bared, his jaw locked open in a silent scream. His arms were raised in front of him, fingers frozen like claws, as if he had been desperately pushing away an invisible terror in his final moments. And his eyes, they were wide open, dilated, staring directly up at the blazing sun with a look of absolute, unadulterated dread. Then they looked further down the deck. There weren't just one or two bodies. The entire deck was a carpet of corpses. Dozens of sailors lay scattered across the iron structures and wooden walkways. Every single one of them had died in the exact same state of frozen terror. Even the ship's dog, a small terrier, was found dead. They pushed forward, driven with grim duty, to find the source of the radio signal. They climbed the metal stairs toward the bridge, their flashlights cutting through the gloom of the corridors. Inside the wheelhouse, they found the captain. He was slumped over the ship's controls, his frozen face still turned toward the horizon, his dead eyes reflecting the empty sky. The rest of his bridge officers lay scattered around the charts, and navigational equipment dropped exactly where they stood. Finally, they reached the radio room. Slumped over the telegraph key was the young radio operator, the man whose trembling voice had carried the final transmission across the ocean. His hand was still resting near the equipment that had broadcast his own death sentence. Like the others, his face was a mask of pure horror. His eyes locked onto something in the dark corner of the room that the rescue team could not see. A whole ship, a whole crew, dead in an instant with no visible cause. The rescue team stood in the center of the floating tomb, completely unnerved. The physical evidence made no sense. If a poison gas or a sudden plague had struck this ship, why were their faces twisted in such violent psychological terror? Why were they fighting off the air itself? The captain of the Silver Star ordered the team to check the cargo holds below. They needed answers, and the secret had to be locked in the belly of the ship. They approached the heavy iron hatch leading to the lower decks. As they cranked the way to unlock it, a strange, foul odor began to seep through the seals. It wasn't the smell of decay, it was a sharp, chemical stench that burned the back of their throats, something metallic and suffocating. They shone their flashlights down into the pitch-black abyss of the cargo hold. The beams of light cut through a swirling, heavy vapor that seemed to dance in the darkness. The air down there felt even colder, almost sub-zero, defying the tropical climate outside. One of the crewmen stepped onto the ladder to descend, but he didn't take more than 2 steps. Suddenly, a deep, low rumble vibrated through the steel floor plates beneath their feet. It wasn't the sound of an engine coming to life. It was the sound of a violent chemical reaction. From the depths of the hold, a sudden intense heat began to rise, instantly clashing with the unnatural cold of the deck. Wisps of thick, acrid grey smoke began to pour out of the hatch.
Fire in the hold! Sound the alarm! Fire! Get off the ship, now! Go!
The command echoed through the dead silence of the Ourang Medan. The rescue crew abandoned their investigation, scrambling back across the deck, stepping over the frozen, staring corpses of the Dutch crew. They threw themselves over the railing and back onto their lifeboats, rowing furiously away from the ghost ship. They had barely secured themselves back on the deck of the Silver Star when the Ourang Medan began to shudder violently. A massive, blinding explosion ripped through the center of the freighter. The iron hull buckled, and the pillar of black smoke and fire erupted into the sky. The blast was so intense that it lifted the multi-ton ship slightly out of the water before slamming it back down. Within minutes, the water rushed into the broken hull. The rescue crew watched in silent awe as the SS Ourang Medan tilted upward, its rusted bow pointing toward the clouds before sliding backward into the dark depths of the ocean. It sank to the bottom of the sea, taking the corpses, the mysterious cargo, and every shred of physical evidence with it into the deep. The Atlantic and Pacific Oceans have swallowed thousands of ships, but none vanished quite like the SS Ourang Medan. When the vessel slid beneath the waves, it didn't just take its dead crew to the bottom, it took its very existence. Months passed. Then, in 1948, the silence broke. A series of articles appeared in Dutch Indonesian newspapers. They claimed that a lone survivor of the Ourang Medan had washed ashore on a deserted island in the Marshall Islands. Before drawing his final breath, this dying sailor allegedly passed a secret diary to a missionary, a diary that exposed a terrifying governmental conspiracy. The reports caught the attention of the intelligence agencies worldwide. In 1954, a classified document from the Central Intelligence Agency, written by an advisor to the director, officially mentioned the Ourang Medan by name, asking a chilling question: did something from the unknown wipe out the crew? Yet, when historians rushed to the official maritime registries in London and Amsterdam, they hit a brick wall. There was no record of a ship named the SS Ourang Medan. There were no insurance claims, no cargo manifests, and no crew lists. It was as if someone with immense global power had systematically erased the ship from history. Or perhaps the ship had never existed under that name at all. To understand the horror of the Ourang Medan, modern investigators have split into two fiercely divided camps. One looks at the human greed, the other looks at the abyss. The first theory is grounded in a terrifying historical reality, the aftermath of World War II. It is highly believed that the Ourang Medan was a rogue smuggling vessel carrying a highly volatile, illegal cargo of Unit 73 bioweapons, specifically nerve gas, potassium cyanide, and nitroglycerin. If seawater leaked into the cargo hold, it would have triggered a catastrophic chemical reaction, releasing a lethal, invisible cloud of toxic gas. The gas would have caused instant asphyxiation, forcing the sailors to choke and claw at the air, their faces freezing in agonizing spasms of psychological horror just before the chemical instability caused the ship to explode. The second theory points to an environmental anomaly. The Straits of Malacca sit directly above a highly active volcanic seabed. Believers in this theory argue that a sudden submarine seismic eruption released a massive bubble of odorless, colorless carbon monoxide gas directly beneath the ship. The crew would have been poisoned in a matter of minutes, dying exactly where they stood, without ever realizing what was killing them. But for those who lean into cosmic horror, the explanation is far more sinister. They point to the unnatural ice-cold temperature on the deck during a tropical summer, the absolute lack of physical injuries, and the fact that the crew was defending themselves from something above them in the sky. To them, the Ourang Medan encountered a localized drift, a spatial anomaly that tore through our reality, exposing the crew to a force so incomprehensible that their minds fractured before their hearts stopped. So, what is the true nature of the SS Ourang Medan? Did a ghost ship truly perish in the fog? Or did we create a monster out of a campfire story? Many historians argue that the entire tragedy is a brilliant maritime myth, a maritime urban legend, born in the smoke-filled taverns of post-war ports, piece by piece, until a fiction writer formalized it into newsprint. They argue that the lack of registration proves it was an illusion, a ghost story designed to personify the terrifying lonely vastness of the sea. Yet seasoned researchers disagree. They know that during the chaos of 1947, hundreds of military and cargo vessels operated under complete secrecy, completely off the grid. If the Ourang Medan was a black market military transport smuggling lethal chemical agents between nations, its entire existence would have been classified as a state secret. The erasure of the ship wasn't a proof that it didn't exist. It was a proof of a highly successful cover-up. A tragedy so severe that the world's superpowers decided it was safer to let the ship become a myth than to admit what they had left floating in the water. 9 decades have passed since the radio waves carried that frantic, trembling code across the dark waters of the Pacific. The wreckage of the Ourang Medan lies somewhere in the crushing, pitch-black trenches of the ocean floor, forever out of human reach. The bones of its terrified crew have dissolved into the salt, and the governments of the old world keep their archives locked tightly away. We are left with a choice. We can believe the comfortable lie that it was all just a story told by bored sailors to pass the time on long, lonely voyages. Or we can look at the evidence, the classified CIA memos, and the chilling detail of those frozen, staring eyes. Next time you find yourself on a ship at night, looking out into the infinite pitch-black horizon of the open ocean, listen closely to the static of the radio. Because out there, in the dark corners, where the maps end and the truth is buried, the ghost of the Ourang Medan is still drifting, and its last transmission is still waiting for an answer. Reality has built-in errors.